At the dawn of the new millennium, one outrageous anthem about a tiny piece of clothing turned its singer into a household name. Sisqó's Thong Song wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural earthquake. Blasting from every radio, every club, every TV screen. But as fast as he shot to superstardom, Sisqó's spotlight dimmed. How does someone go from global sensation to near forgotten so quickly? Before the bleached hair, flashy dance moves, an unforgettable anthem about a thong, Sisqó was simply Mark Althevon Andrews, a kid growing up in Baltimore, Maryland. Born in November 1978, Mark was raised in a city where opportunity often clashed with hardship. Baltimore in the late 1980s and early 90s was a place of sharp contrasts. Inner city struggles with crime and poverty stood side by side with a thriving, raw music scene that was shaping the future of R&B and hip-hop. Music wasn't just entertainment for him, it was survival. Mark was small in stature but carried himself with the kind of energy that demanded attention. He sang in school, he danced at local events, and he dreamed far beyond the borders of his neighborhood. Friends described him as fearless, someone who could light up a room with his confidence. That charisma would eventually become his greatest weapon. In high school, Mark joined forces with three other young dreamers, Larry Jazz Anthony, James Woody Green, and Tamir Nokio Ruffin. Together, they formed a group called Dru Hill, named after Druid Hill Park in their hometown. The group wasn't polished in the beginning, but what they lacked in resources, they made up for with raw passion. Their harmony stood out, and their style was rooted in the church choir tradition, blended with the streetwise energy of Baltimore. By the mid-1990s, Dru Hill began performing at local talent shows and even worked out a deal with a fudge shop in Baltimore's Inner Harbor to sing for tourists. It was a humble start, but those performances honed their stage presence and vocal control. Record label scouts soon noticed their talent, and in 1996, Dru Hill signed with Island Records. This was the turning point. Their debut album, Dru Hill, released in '96, put them on the R&B map. Songs like Tell Me and In My Bed showcased not only the group's harmony, but also Sisqó's ability to step out front as a lead vocalist. His high-pitched, expressive tone was unmistakable, playful one moment, heart-wrenching the next. It was clear he wasn't just another member. He was the spark. As the group's popularity grew, Dru Hill became part of the soundtrack of the late 90s. They contributed to movie soundtracks, including Soul Food and Wild Wild West, and their blend of ballads and up-tempo tracks earned them platinum records. But even in a successful group, Sisqó's personality shined brighter than the rest. He had a taste for the dramatic, flashy clothes, hair dyed platinum blonde, and a natural magnetism that couldn't be ignored. Behind the scenes, Mark Andrews was carefully transforming into Sisqó, a persona larger than life. He wasn't content to blend in. While the other members were comfortable as a group, Sisqó wanted something more. He wanted his own stage, his own spotlight. And by the late 1990s, that hunger was about to pay off. The rise of Dru Hill gave Sisqó credibility, but his solo ambitions gave him wings. When Dru Hill temporarily went on hiatus around 1999, he seized the opportunity. He was ready to unleash his energy on the world in a way that was louder, wilder, and unapologetically Sisqó. The stage was set, the world was watching, and destiny was knocking. In '99, the world of pop and R&B was dominated by boy bands, girl groups, and superstar soloists. Into this crowded landscape came Sisqó Sisqó platinum blonde hair blazing, abs on full display, and a swagger that demanded attention. His debut solo album, Unleash the Dragon, released in late 1999, was built to showcase his charisma. The lead single "Got to Get It" gained some traction, but nothing could prepare the world for what came next. In early 2000, Thong Song dropped. It wasn't just a track, it was an explosion. With a playful, almost mischievous violin riff driving it forward, and lyrics that celebrated a garment barely big enough to be called clothing, the song tapped into something no one realized they wanted until Sisqó delivered it. It was cheeky, it was bold, it was over the top, and it was unforgettable. The music video, featuring Sisqó and his crew surrounded by dancers in bikinis, cemented its place in pop culture. The imagery, Sisqó backflipping on the beach, flashing his wild grin, became iconic. MTV put it on heavy rotation, and suddenly Thong Song was everywhere. By the summer of 2000, it was a cultural juggernaut. The single hit number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, but its cultural impact went far beyond the charts. It became a meme before memes existed, referenced on TV shows, parodied by comedians, and blasted at every party. The track sold millions, earned his Sisqó 4 Grammy nominations, and pushed Unleash the Dragon to multi-platinum status. For a brief, shining moment, Sisqó was untouchable. He wasn't just another R&B singer, he was the face of the year 2000's pop spectacle. He performed at the MTV Video Music Awards, the Grammys, and even made cameo appearances in films and TV. Everywhere you looked, Sisqó's larger-than-life persona was there, in interviews, in commercials, even on talk shows where he would proudly demonstrate his backflips in a suit. What made Sisqó's peak so fascinating was the sheer audacity of it. While other R&B singers crooned about love and heartbreak, he doubled down on outrageous fun. The dyed hair, flashy leather outfits, and high-energy dance moves made him stand out in an era where image was everything. He leaned into the spectacle, and for a moment, the spectacle loved him back. But behind the scenes, there was a tension. Thong Song had catapulted him into superstardom, but it also defined him in a way that would be hard to escape. Everywhere he went, he was the Thong Song guy. That was both his crown and his cage. Still, in 2000, there was no denying his dominance. He was booked on massive tours, featured on magazine covers, and courted by fashion brands. He even worked with other major artists, trying to prove he was more than just one outrageous song. Yet, in the eyes of the public, Sisqó had already become a symbol of a very specific moment in pop culture. He was the sound of the millennium's first summer. It was a peak few artists ever get to experience, an intoxicating mix of fame, money, and cultural ubiquity. But peaks, by their nature, don't last forever. And as quickly as Sisqó had climbed, cracks were already beginning to show in the foundation of his stardom. Fame came at lightning speed for Sisqó, but so did the backlash. After Thong Song, the expectation was clear: deliver another anthem just as big, just as outrageous. But that kind of lightning rarely strikes twice. In late 2001, Sisqó released his second album, Return of Dragon. Despite the bold title, the album couldn't capture the magic. It went gold, which by most standards is a success. But compared to the multi-platinum triumph of his debut, it was a sharp step down. Critics dismissed it as rushed, and fans didn't connect with its singles the way they had with Thong Song. Meanwhile, the music industry itself was shifting. The early 2000s saw R&B moving in new directions, ushering in smoother sounds from artists like Usher and Alicia Keys, while hip-hop began dominating the charts with a grittier edge. Sisqó's flashy style suddenly felt like a relic of a different moment. The world had moved on, and he struggled to adapt. Adding to the problem, Dru Hill's reunion attempts were plagued with tension. Internal conflicts and label disputes slowed momentum, and Sisqo's solo career felt increasingly like an act without an audience. The larger-than-life persona that had once seemed unstoppable began to feel like a parody of itself. Public perception also worked against him. To many, Sisqo was forever the Thong Song guy, and that label became a trap. Instead of being seen as a versatile R&B artist, he was reduced to a novelty act. Time .95s. Opportunities shrank. The high-profile appearances dried up. By the mid-2000s, he was no longer a staple on MTV or the radio. Sisqo tried to stay visible, appearing on reality shows, attempting comebacks, and touring overseas, but none of it brought him back to the heights of 2000. The dragon that once seemed unleashed had been caged, and the world barely noticed. By the mid-2000s, Sisqo's fall from the charts had become undeniable. The man who once defined the sound of a summer was now a punchline on late-night comedy shows. While other R&B stars of his era managed to reinvent themselves, Sisqo remained chained to the memory of one outrageous hit. His platinum hair and leather outfits became symbols of a time people had outgrown, and the industry was ruthless in moving on. The commercial failure of Return of Dragons stung, but what hurt more was the silence that followed. His record label shifted attention to fresher artists, leaving Sisqo adrift. The energy that had once fueled endless interviews, award shows, and magazine spreads evaporated. By 2000, the media cycle had essentially erased him from the mainstream conversation. He attempted to keep his career alive through television. Sisqo appeared on reality shows like Gone Country and Celebrity Big Brother UK, where he showcased his flamboyant personality to audiences who remembered him only vaguely. These appearances earned headlines, but not the kind that restored musical credibility. To many viewers, he was no longer a pop star, but a curiosity, a relic from a wilder pop era trying to cling to relevance. The world of Dru Hill wasn't much kinder. The group reunited multiple times throughout the 2000s and 2010s, releasing albums and touring smaller venues, but never recaptured their late 90s dominance. Within those reunions, Sisqo was just another member of a nostalgic act, rather than the breakout solo star he had once been. Fans who grew up with Thong Song look back with fondness but little expectation. For a new generation, Sisqo was more of a trivia answer than a living artist. This disconnect between his cultural legacy and his present reality deepened his disappearance from the spotlight. He was remembered, but not truly seen. The press reflected this fading presence. Tabloids occasionally mentioned him, often in the context of whatever happened to. How features, lumping him in with other artists who had burned bright and then vanished. Each article reinforced the narrative of decline, making a comeback feel increasingly impossible. By the end of the 2000s, Sisqo was a ghost of his former fame. He continued performing small tours, international gigs, festivals where nostalgia acts were welcomed, but gone were the days of sold-out arenas and multi-platinum hits. His career hadn't ended, but it had shrunk into something quieter, less glamorous, and largely invisible to the mainstream. Two decades after Thong Song turned him into a household name, Sisqo is no longer the global sensation plastered across MTV screens. But he never truly disappeared either. Instead, he found a middle ground, a quieter, more sustainable career, far from the chaos of peak fame. Today, Sisqo continues to perform, mostly on the nostalgia circuit. Festivals celebrating the late 90s and early 2000s regularly invite him and Dru Hill, where crowds of 30 and 40-somethings sing along to the songs that define their youth. In these spaces, Sisqo is celebrated not as a novelty, but as a living reminder of an era that shaped a generation. His voice still carries the same distinctive tone, and his energy on stage remains fierce, even as the venues are smaller. He has also leaned into television opportunities. Appearances on shows like Celebrity Wife Swap and various reality competitions kept his name in circulation. While these ventures rarely brought him back to the music charts, they revealed another side of him, playful, self-aware, and unafraid to poke fun at his own legacy. He knows he will always be the Thong Song guy, and at this stage, he embraces it. On a personal level, Sisqó's life stabilized in ways it never could during his whirlwind fame. He married his longtime girlfriend Elizabeth Pham in 2018 after dating for over a decade, and together they are raising their children. For someone who once embodied outrageous spectacle, domestic stability became his new stage. He often shares glimpses of this life in interviews, expressing gratitude for being able to step away from the relentless spotlight and focus on family. Musically, he continues to work, albeit in smaller doses. Dru Hill remains active, with periodic reunions and new releases targeted at loyal fans. Sisqó himself occasionally drops solo track Time 0.65s, but without the pressure of needing to dominate the charts. Instead, his creative output feels more personal and expression of love, buys for love for music rather than a desperate bid for mainstream relevance. Financially, he is not the megastar he once was, but steady touring, royalties from Thong Song, and reality TV appearances have allowed him to maintain comfort. Unlike some fallen stars who face bankruptcy or scandal, Sisqó has carved out a stable, middle-tier celebrity life. Not everywhere, not every day, but enough to live with dignity and recognition. What's perhaps most surprising is how much respect Sisqó has regained in hindsight. Younger artists and DJs still sample and reference Thong Song, acknowledging its place in pop culture history. Social media often revives the track as a guilty pleasure anthem, introducing it to Gen Z audiences who weren't even born when it first hit. The song may have defined him, but it also gave him a legacy few artists can claim, a single so distinctive that it refuses to fade completely. In 2021, Sisqó stands as a figure who has weathered the extremes of fame. From obscurity in Baltimore, to global stardom, to pop culture punchline, and finally to a steady, balanced life. His journey illustrates both the volatility of celebrity and the possibility of survival beyond it. He no longer chases dragons. Instead, he tends to his family, his fans, and the echoes of a song that once shook the world. Sisqó's story is a reminder of how fame can be both a rocket and a cage. One outrageous song launched him into the stratosphere, but it also defined him so narrowly that escaping its shadow proved nearly impossible. The Thong Song made him unforgettable, but it also made him unrepeatable. His rise, peak, and fall reveal the volatility of pop culture at the turn of the millennium, a world obsessed with spectacle, ready to crown a new star overnight, but just as quick to move on. In that sense, Sisqó wasn't alone. He joined a long list of artists who burned brightly and briefly, victims of both their own success and an unforgiving industry. Yet there's something almost poetic about where he is now. Far from the chaos of 2000, he lives with stability, family, and the ability to keep performing for those who still remember. His legacy may not be vast, but it's unique. Very few artists can claim a song so instantly recognizable, so tied to an era, that it continues to echo decades later. For fans, his journey carries a lesson. Behind every viral hit, there is a person ambitious, flawed, hopeful, trying to navigate a world that often values novelty over humanity. Sisqo's story is not just about what happened to one man, but about the culture that creates and discards its stars at breathtaking speed. So, the next time Thong Song comes on, it might spark laughter, nostalgia, or even a guilty smile. But maybe it should also spark reflection about the fleeting nature of fame, the human cost behind the spectacle, and the strange endurance of a song that should have been forgotten but never was. And as always, the question lingers for us: which star should we revisit next?